is Keys to the Shop, episode 453, The Craft of Cafe Operations. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFirio. I am your host for the show. Welcome to 2024. I think it's still safe to say that. We're recording this close to the published date on January 15th, but it's still early enough for me to say Happy New Year, and I'm excited about today's episode. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and share the episode with your friends. Also vote for Keys to the Shop, who has been nominated for a Sprudgie Award over at sprudge.com/vote. That's the place to go, sprudge.com/vote, to vote for Keys to the Shop for Best Coffee Podcast amongst a host of other categories of great professionals. Keys to the Shop is nominated as a finalist in the running for Best Coffee Podcast, and it would mean the world to me if you would cast your vote for Keys to the Shop. Thank you so much for doing that. And one thing that is really exciting coming up in March is a new round, a new season, if you will, of key holder coaching groups. Okay, plural, S at the end, means there are going to be more than one. We've had our inaugural group. We've had 6 owners in this group. We've got like 4 or 5 calls left, and they have been dynamic. I don't use the word life-changing very lightly here, because I do think from the testimonies of the members that it has been life-changing and transformational for people's businesses. And that is the power of community. And that's what key holder coaching groups are all about. Peer-to-peer coffee shop owners getting together, hosted by myself for 2 hours each call, 12 calls over 6 months, really focusing on helping each other succeed and encouraging, challenging, giving insight. It's really been powerful. So now we're going to be launching more groups. So this is your opportunity. If you're interested in joining key holder coaching groups, I would love for you to reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com, and let me know you're interested. And I will put your name on a preliminary list of early access to the application, where you can fill it out to be considered for these new groups coming up in March. Again, if you're a coffee shop owner and you want a community of like-minded professionals who also bring diverse perspectives to your world to help you grow and thrive as an owner, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. So in the new year, there's no doubt a lot of people are focusing on what to make better about their cafes, and coffee has to be one of those things that we focus on. It's really a matter of the finest margins when it comes to improving quality. When you're in a community like specialty coffee that's just growing and growing, but every little bit of difference makes a big difference. That's why I love the Ground Control Brewer and what it does to elevate batch brew coffee and more in your cafe. Ground Control launched with the Cyclops brewer, iconic, classic, beautiful, award-winning, and now they've got a new brewer that's actually more compact. It's 24 inches high, plus it has 30% higher volume for batch espresso and cold brew concentrate, and is cloud connected to a smart dispenser that tracks all your brewing data. Makes concentrates for iced lattes, also 8-minute cold brew. These are things that are really valuable for your cafe. I hope that you would visit them at groundscontrol.coffee. Learn more about this equipment and what it has been doing for people all over the world to help their coffee shops succeed. Again, visit them at groundscontrol.coffee. You know, we also have to acknowledge the fact that in the course of creating coffee, we have to customize our drinks to suit the tastes of our guests. And one of the things that we always want to be paying attention to is the plant-based customer. The plant-based customer is wanting just as much excellence as the non-plant-based customer. And that's why I love the Barista series from Pacific. It's the line of plant-based performance beverages designed for baristas and approved by baristas all over the world. It is the cornerstone of plant-based beverages and still the leader and consistent choice of professionals all over. Stands up to the heat from steaming. It produces great texture for latte art, and it also keeps the balance of flavor focused on the coffee. Check them out at pacificfoodservice.com. Get samples, taste it for yourself. Find out how it performs, and I think you're going to be convinced. If you're looking for the best plant-based beverages for your cafe, then definitely consider the Barista series from Pacific. Okay, everyone. Well, today I wanted to jump into a topic that I think is really critical because it is kind of a backbone of our businesses. And it is kind of a transformation that happens when you go from enthusiast to professional in different areas of the coffee industry. So if we're thinking about somebody who goes from, I love coffee shops, I want to open a coffee shop, this person has to become familiar with the coffee industry. And usually the gateway to do that is drinking coffee, learning about coffee, the story of coffee. It's coffee, right? We get immersed in it, right? We just jump into this industry and it becomes part of our personality. But one of the things that has to be exercised in the cafe by leadership is the ability to not just focus on the coffee as a craft. That is 100% one of the things that we focus on, but to focus on the operations as a craft as well. A craft is something that you put your hand to and form with intention, with a desired outcome of the final product. When we look at coffee, it's easy for us to create this formula that says, okay, I can go back far in the chain of how this coffee got to me. We could trace the coffee all the way to a seedling, to a full-grown tree, to a cherry, a washing station, export, import, roasting, hopper, in my cup. It is remarkable how much we can track, and we do. And it's getting better and better, more transparency. The industry is becoming more and more transparent. But one of the things that's the most opaque, you cannot track it, is how did we get to the point where our cafes have so much transparency around the product, but have so much dysfunction in our operations? The decisions that we make are a mystery sometimes behind the scenes, but they lead to very clear outcomes on the bar. We've talked about this through the years on the show regarding things like how we choose to communicate or not communicate changes of the menu and direction of the company, how we choose to equip our staff with the resources they need to succeed or not. And we treat the process of operations like it's an automatic thing, when in fact it is a craft. That is something that you need to become passionate about, just as passionate as you are about coffee. In fact, if you're not passionate about operations, we'll define it as the systems and structures and practices that lead to cultural institutions, habits, and behaviors that in turn lead to desired outcomes with people, place, and product. Okay? That's a very easy way to think about it. And that's the kind of thing that we think about when it comes to, okay, well, maybe I don't like a coffee that's fermented in this way because it has this result. So I'm going to choose a coffee that's processed in this way because I like that result. Now that is easy for us to think of because we can trace back to the root of why something happened because we've invested a lot of time and energy into that. But the question is, how much time and energy have we really given to looking at something that is resulting on the bar? Let's say it's a hospitality experience that you don't like. Your staff, for example, are not as motivated as you would like them to be. What we do in those situations often is we will chalk it up to the first thought we have. I joke that it's always about, it's hard to find good help, or it's this generation. And we put ourselves into this sort of like a fatalistic mindset of almost pretending like we have no control over this. And when we do kind of muster up the idea that maybe we do have control over this, we don't do it in such a sustained way, in a mindful way. We just make large swings and large assumptions at it. And we don't treat it as an academic thing. And in other words, we don't treat it as a craft. And curiosity and personal excellence and pursuit daily to refine a craft is what makes somebody predictably excellent at that craft. And if your operations in the cafe are to match the standards that you have for your coffee's excellence, then you need to treat it just like you would making the perfect cup of coffee. Because experiences in the cafe are all about what has happened before the customer arrives in order to make that experience happen in a great way. And you can't just hope that they're going to have a great experience. You have to know that they are going to have a great experience because of how you have crafted what goes on behind the scenes. Now, if you haven't listened to the shift break called Pulling Out the Fridge, then I think you should, because that really gets to the heart of what drives me, I think, in coffee, which is I want to know what's behind that. I want to know what's underneath that. Like, if something happens, I want to say, well, why did that happen? And there's this idea in the Toyota production system in lean manufacturing Kaizen world, which is asking why 5 times. Sometimes you ask why more than 5 times, but this has to do with root cause analysis. And it requires that we start out with a mindset of patience with a problem, and we honor the problem as an opportunity. We don't approach problems begrudgingly. We are looking at them, we should look at them as a gift. The same way as if somebody gives you a bad review on Yelp, you can say, oh, that's annoying. Oh, it's a little fly in the ointment. Well, a fly in the ointment, yeah, maybe. But how did the fly get in your ointment to begin with? And how can you prevent that? That the gift is the inconvenience. Yeah, right? So if you start from the root of saying, yes, there's going to be inconveniences, these are opportunities for refinement that without them, you will operate blindly in the cafe, or you'll just plug your ears, close your eyes, and hum to yourself until you wake up one day and see that everything is in chaos. So as you approach this and you say, yes, I want to be a craftsperson when it comes to my cafe's operations. Just like a great cup of coffee, I want my coffee shop to have this balance, this flavor, a great aftertaste. I want it to be invigorating. I want all of that to be traceable and know why. Why does it taste so good? And for my operations, that's what I want. Then you have to approach operations with curiosity and with patience and say, I can't just waste problems. And by the way, this also applies to successes. So when I go into a cafe for a cafe assessment, we'll spend a couple of days there really investigating what's happening with the operations and then follow up with some coaching. And what we do is not just focus on, okay, well, what's happening that shouldn't be happening. We also focus on what is awesome, what is great, what is something I love. You know, we talked about this again on another episode where we talked about bottling your best barista. It's paying attention to what is working and also to what is not working and being a craftsperson regarding those things. It's dialing in your operations. That's a part of crafting operations. And so that's your approach to this when you're looking at your business. I mentioned people, place, and product. You can say quality, operations, and people. Those are my 3 pillars, keys to the shop consulting. And it works really well because you could fit pretty much everything that goes on in a cafe. If you had a mind map with cafe in the center and you explode it out, connecting all the lines, there's people, and then how much you pay them and how you train them, how you talk to them, how you communicate, and what the hiring process is. And there's so many things to talk about with people. There's also the place, the feel of the space, the functionality, the cleanliness, the style, the coherency with the brand. There's the product, of course, which we love so much, which is our coffee, our espresso beverages, signature beverages, non-coffee, food. All of that stuff fits under those umbrellas of people, quality, and operations, or place, people, and product. So we just kind of think of lots of acronyms that we could throw around there. But the point is, it kind of comes in those 3s. And that's a great place to look at if you want to organize how you spend your time as a leader. I don't care if you can pour latte art really well as the boss. I don't care if you can pull out those flavor notes or if you're a Q grader or whatever it is. I actually care that you are an expert in the operations, in that you are at least a student of those things. And you can be a student, by the way, of lots of different elements of operations outside of your coffee shop. It's great to read business books. It's great to listen to podcasts and become educated. But if you're not studying your own shop first, there's no way that you're going to know how to apply any of the things you find outside your shop. what to throw away, what to keep, what to use, how to apply it. You've got to become a student of your cafe's operations before you can become a director and craftsperson of those operations. And so this brings me to the idea of who you are in the business. One of the things that we talk about in some of our first coaching calls when I work with clients is the idea that you have to have a job description for yourself the same way as your baristas do. And we would never think, okay, I'm going to put this barista, typically the lowest paid member of, when it comes to hourly, money coming directly from the company, we're not talking about tips. Okay. We're talking about what you pay them. They're going to be the most regulated often in terms of what you're expecting from them because you're actually putting money toward that thing. Now, because a lot of times as an owner, you don't take a paycheck, and for many, many years often, it feels as though you don't necessarily need the same kind of regulation or planning that other people do. But in fact, you do, because your role, while maybe not monetarily rewarded in the moment, is one of the most consequential. As you go up in terms of levels in leverage of authority, it's more important to know what you're doing, why you're doing it, where, with whom, all of those things. But what we see is the opposite. We see the inverse, which is the more consequential your role, it feels like maybe you should just embody it more and you shouldn't have as much planning. I just do not agree with that. You should be planning your weeks. You should be planning your time, planning your presence, both your coaching and training and your affirmations and encouragements and the projects that you're working on with a bigger picture in mind. And when it comes to operations, if you take those three things, the people, place, and the product, and you just time chunk some hours of the week to focus on assessing those elements of your business in a conscious way, you're going to become way more familiar with what is beautiful and great that needs to be fortified by funding, by attention, by innovation, and what is not beautiful and great that could need to be removed or refined. And then you can also innovate, give funding, create solutions for those things. That's what your business needs you to be and to be paying attention to. The question that we run into often when it comes to growing cafes is when I get to the point where I hire a manager or an operations manager even, what do I do with my time? Well, this is one of the things that you do with your time. We might call this high level thinking or high level leadership. And let's not conflate the idea of high level with being aloof. There is a zooming in and a zooming out that always happens with these things. You can be in a high level of leadership and have this big picture perspective, but it always needs to be connected to the ground level realities. When it's not, you get this disconnect that just ruins businesses. And by employing this idea of curiosity and being a craftsperson of the operations, along with your team, especially if you have delegated leadership, you all become that group of craftspeople that end up creating a predictably excellent experience for staff and for customers. And so this is a paradigm shift that I want you to really embrace. Coffee is awesome, and coffee can be really awesome if you also focus on operations as a craft. And there are lots of episodes you can go back to listen to regarding systems as care, regarding SOPs and checklists, and other things that are all tools for craftspeople. They're all things that you have in your tool belt to use for the purpose of serving people coffee. And to be like Barista Magazine's tagline, serving people, serving coffee. This is how it happens. And so the next step, I think, for you, no matter where you are, it doesn't matter how big or small you happen to be. Now, you might have to include more people in these conversations, but you can take the next step directly after this podcast. Go get yourself some kind of a notebook. Digital or physical. I favor paper usually myself, and I begrudgingly use digital forms, but I want you to go out to your cafe, and I want you, when you're there, to be an observer and be curious and really assess. Do the assessment that somebody like myself would do and watch and take it all down under these areas of people, place, and product. And make notes to yourself about where we are right now and where we could be going. But don't just jump to conclusions about what it is that needs to change right now or how it needs to change. Get curious about one or two things that are really of great consequence in each of those areas. If you just had to pick 3 things, one in each group, one thing that needs to change about people, it could be engagement with customers. One thing that needs to change about product, you could notice that, well, we have a lot of drinks being underfilled for some reason. Okay, and then another thing about the place, boy, our bathroom is just really messy all the time. If you just focused on one thing in each of those areas in this new year, you're going to see transformation happen. Not only that, but you're going to start to embody the identity of somebody whose craft is not just coffee, but whose craft is operations. And that leads to better coffee. It leads to better service, a more successful business, and a more joy-filled and satisfying experience as an owner and operator of that business. And so I hope that this has been helpful to you. Just a bit of a quick one in terms of solo episodes today, but I really think that it's a powerful thing to employ. As usual, I want you to go to the recommended episodes that I list out in the show notes and go listen to those. A lot of them will be shift breaks, so they're not really long. You can work through those, but it gives you a little bit more insight into how we're looking at operations and what the possibilities are for you as you pursue this craft. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback today about this episode, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting, if assessment of your cafe and coaching and consultation sounds like a really interesting thing to you, then I would love to have that conversation. And don't forget, key holder coaching groups are coming up in March. You can email chris@keystotheshop.com to talk to me about that as well. Thanks everybody very much for all of your time and support over the years. Please vote for Keys to the Shop on the Sprudgie Awards over at sprudge.com/vote. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.